What happens when they hurt the chosen woman during the black moon? Right now, the black moon is active, a low, concentrated lunar frequency that pulls certain energies into the spotlight. When the chosen woman, the one tuned to that frequency, is harmed during this transit, something shifts in the field around her and within the people who thought they could make her small. This is not about dramatic cosmic vengeance. It is about exposure, recalibration, and the quiet insistence of truth. Think of Lilith here not as history or doctrine, but as a current of presence, a frequency that magnifies clarity, sharpens boundary sensing, and refuses to let a person dissolve to soothe other people's discomfort. When that frequency rides the black moon, it amplifies what was already there. It takes whatever edge of certainty or refusal to shrink someone carried and turns the dial up. It doesn't create power out of nothing. It makes visible what was already waking beneath the surface. If you've ever watched a lamp in a dark room, you know what happens when someone flips a brighter bulb into place. The same corners light up, but the contours become harder to ignore. Shadows move. Objects that once blended into the dim are suddenly unmistakable. The black moon frequency is that brighter bulb for the feminine-coded clarity. Hurt her now, and the light will make more than her wound visible. It will reveal contours of truth that had been muted by habit, fear, or convenience. This energy is not gender exclusive. I will use she as an archetypal voice because it resonates with the image of the feminine-coded frequency. But know this: anyone carrying that pattern of presence, that insistence on being whole and seen, can activate the same movement. And when they are harmed during this transit, the consequences unfold along three coordinated lines: the woman's amplification of presence, the social and energetic exposure of the harm doer, and a broader realignment in the collective where boundaries simply become harder to ignore. Listen closely now, because the mechanics are subtle and the results are surgical rather than theatrical. The black moon frequency amplifies presence in three distinct ways. First, it expands perceptual clarity. What used to feel like a fog becomes a thin, slicing mist. Meanings sharpen, edges define themselves. Second, it strengthens boundary calibration. People begin to feel, with less noise, what is theirs and what is not. Third, it intensifies energetic radiance. The chosen woman does not simply recover after harm. Her voice, posture, decisions, and availability begin to broadcast more precisely to the world. She is not louder in a brittle way. She is clearer. People who rely on her silence to move freely will notice the change like a sudden change in traffic patterns. The mechanism is not mystical punishment. It operates like a revealing light through an old photograph. The harm is still a harm. The wound may sting, but the luminescence around the woman increases her signal so that the pattern of harm, where it came from, who supported it, what it required, becomes visible to more people, including, crucially, to the person who inflicted it. Here is how that exposure tends to unfold. When someone harms a Lilith-aligned person during the black moon, the first thing that often happens is misalignment. That person's internal story, how they saw themselves, the narrative that allowed them to justify, minimize, or ignore the harm, starts to fray. They may suddenly find the reasons they gave themselves earlier to be less believable. Where they relied on projection, they now meet a more honest mirror. Opportunities that once fit easily begin to resist. A job that felt open begins to stall. Conversations that used to go smoothly feel awkward. This is not mystical punishment. It is consequence in the energetic sense. Alignment shifts, and whatever was depending on that alignment becomes less reliable. Next, exposure tends to ripple socially. People who built their lives around the quiet containment of the woman, her labor, emotional availability, reputational shielding, discover the seams. Allies in the past may step back when the woman no longer plays the role they depended on her to play. The harm doer's attempts to carry on as before are met with friction. Colleagues question their decisions. Intimate partners notice a change in dynamics. Mutual friends begin to see inconsistencies. It is as if a small, precise light sweeps across a mural, and the parts painted with hurried, dishonest strokes no longer fit the whole. Third, there is an internal disorientation for the harm doer. Without drama, their inner compass loses its easy navigation. Where they used to move through relationships with unconscious shortcuts, blaming others, spinning the story, they now face the gap between their self-image and their actions. People often describe this as a fog that arrives after arrogance. They knew how to defend themselves before, and suddenly the defenses feel like old costumes. They may find it harder to persuade others because the woman's clarified presence undermines the lie that once sustained their narrative. Make no mistake, this process is not uniform. Not everyone who harms a Lilith-aligned person will experience the same fallout. Some will double down into avoidance, projecting blame outward and refusing to change. Others will encounter a steady, slow dismantling of opportunities that require truthful collaboration. Many will feel mild to intense disorientation. Doors that once opened begin to hesitate. Promotions freeze. Social invitations that once arrived without effort begin to thin. The key is that consequence here tends to be revealing and corrective rather than theatrically punitive. It opens a space where accountability becomes possible or where avoidance becomes harder to maintain. Let me give you concrete signs to watch for. Signs that the black moon is doing its work around someone who has been harmed. These are practical, observable markers you can notice in yourself or in others, and they are distinct from metaphysical rhetoric. First sign, intuition sharpens. The chosen woman finds that what used to feel like vague unease now arrives as crisp recognition. Patterns that once took months to name are recognized in days. She knows when a conversation is about control, when a partner is deflecting, when a colleague is mining her patience. This is not mere sensitivity, it's a faster informational processing. The internal warning system moves from murmurs to clear signals. Second sign, reduced tolerance for draining dynamics. Where she once accommodated microaggressions, emotional labor imbalances, or repeated boundary crossings because it felt safer, she now says no more quickly, and with less internal debate. This looks like fewer explanations, less people-pleasing, and cleaner exits from conversations that waste her energy. It might look abrupt to observers accustomed to her old patterns, but to her it feels like finally speaking the simplest truth. Third sign, decisions become clearer and faster. Choices that used to be indecisive now land with a distinct feel of alignment. Career pivots, relationship limits, and financial recalibrations may happen with a decisiveness that surprises others. The chosen woman feels guided into a narrower corridor, less ambient possibility, but greater fidelity to what actually fits. Other signs that often accompany these are boundary upgrades, literal changes in availability or expectations, a recalibration of time and energy, and social pruning, where relationships that relied on convenience rather than mutuality loosen their hold. Emotionally, there's usually a strange mix, firmness and tenderness, rage and wise distance. The black moon makes room for both. Now we must be careful. Exposure is not revenge. I will say this plainly. The spiritual current here does not exist to punish. What it does is to insist that truth be honored. When truth was compromised, when someone dismissed, silenced, or hurt the chosen woman, the black moon tends to turn the light onto that compromise. The result is accountability, or at least the opportunity for accountability. The mechanisms are often ordinary. People's trust is recalibrated, reputations are reassessed, and systems that relied on manipulation wobble. Imagine a small team at work where one person has habitually spoken for a colleague, edited that colleague's contributions, and shrugged when criticism landed on them instead. If the colleague aligns with the black moon frequency and refuses that editing, if she insists on her own voice, the team will soon discover that the person who claimed authority actually depended on that silence. Meetings that used to smooth over now reveal who has been doing the labor of framing. Promotions that once felt like a sure thing may be reconsidered. That's exposure. The team isn't struck by lightning. It is simply forced to see the truth more clearly. Another commonplace version involves intimate dynamics. If someone's control relied on the other person minimizing themselves to keep peace, the black moon can turn the tide. When the chosen woman refuses to shrink, refuses to smooth over the pain, the partner who leaned on that smoothing finds their way of relating no longer functional. They might respond by seeking to repair. Some will be unable to and will drift away. The difference between repair and drift is not cosmic adjudication, it is human accountability. Some will choose to change, others will not. The black moon, in that sense, magnifies the choice. So how does the chosen woman herself move through this? What is her arc when she is hurt under this transit? First, she often feels the wound with unusual clarity. The initial sting can feel deeper because her perceptual field is brighter. But that clarity also becomes the tool for transformation. Rather than being consumed by reaction, she tends to transmute the hurt into direction. This transmutation follows a few practical moves that reveal the spiritual logic of the cycle. She upgrades boundaries. This can mean explicit conversations, new red lines in relationships, or silent adjustments, less availability, firmer yeses, and more decisive nos. She refines her audience. She chooses where to speak and who should be allowed to stay close. She invests differently. Time, attention, and emotional labor are allotted with stricter discernment. She also amplifies her voice and presence, but in a calibrated way. Where she once softened language to keep another comfortable, she now speaks without undoing the edges of her meaning to make the listener more comfortable. That doesn't mean cruelty. It means clarity, a clean naming of hurt, a straightforward account of needs, and an insistence that reciprocity is a baseline rather than a favor. Crucially, the woman channels pain into direction. What hurts becomes a compass. She often discerns new work to do, new projects, or creative expressions that align with the truth she refused to bury. Pain reframes into mission rather than mere grievance. This is why you often see people in these transits pivoting careers, starting new projects, writing books, or investing in relationships that resonate with their new boundaries. The wound turned into a map. There is also a collective lift. These individual shifts do not remain isolated. When a woman refuses to shrink and recalibrates publicly, calmly, clearly, without drama, others who were complicit in their own shrinking see permission. The black moon triggers a wider redefinition. Communities begin to align with clearer values. Some circles will prune themselves and become leaner but more honest. Other networks will expand to include more people who can hold that clarity. The movement here is toward fidelity over veneer. Again, notice the tone. This is not vindictive. The world does not suddenly become hostile to those who harmed. Sometimes it simply becomes less hospitable to their methods. Doors that opened because of manipulation may close. Invitations that arrived because another person kept quiet can recede. This results in a practical incoherence for the harm-doer. The things they relied on to keep their image intact lose speed. They face the practical consequences of their choices. If they want to remain in alignment with the systems they once navigated, they must change. The black moon creates the conditions where change is often required. You may ask, does this always lead to redemptive repair? Not always. Some people will double down on projection and find other places that accept their patterns. Some will find themselves blocked for a time and then build a different life without confronting the past. The black moon simply makes the option of superficial continuation less tenable. That can be terrifying to those who have built a life on such continuations, and the fear often looks like anger, disorientation, or frantic attempts to reclaim narrative control. The difference between those who heal and those who do not is the willingness to face the mirror the exposure brings. Let me pause here to address an important caution. I am not saying the black moon is a moral policeman or that it guarantees a tidy justice. People get hurt, and harm is real. The black moon does not promise that every abuser will be exposed in court, or that every manipulator will lose their livelihood. What it does is raise the energetic cost of maintaining deception. It mobilizes perception, which often forces practical consequences like lost alignment, shifting social support, or stalled opportunities. For those who are committed to accountability, these conditions are invitations to repair. For those who are not, they are obstacles that can feel destabilizing. We must also be honest about the inner work the chosen woman will often do. Amplified clarity can be disorienting. When your internal field sharpens, you see patterns that had been blurry for years. That clarity requires integration. It asks, which of my patterns contributed to being vulnerable here? What boundaries did I neglect? Where did I accommodate fear? The black moon is not just an external corrective. It is an internal initiation, demanding better stewardship of self. The woman who weathers this transit and emerges stronger is the one who uses the exposure to refine, not to sear or to weaponize, her new edges. Here is a condensed set of practices that tend to serve this process, offered neutrally rather than prescriptively. These are not rituals. They are pragmatic stances that honor the energetic logic of this transit. Tend to what clarifies, protect what matters, and speak with succinctness. First practice, inventory your boundaries. Take stock of where your time and energy flows, which commitments leech your clarity, which relationships demand your muting. The black moon rewards honest accounting. Second practice, cultivate selective availability. With clarity, you will want to be intentional about where you show up. This is not isolation. It is strategic presence. When you choose where to be present, you multiply your impact. Third practice, name the wound and its source plainly to trusted confidants or a counselor. Naming is not airing for spectacle. It's the way you convert chaos into a map for repair. Fourth practice, allow creativity and direction to arise from pain. The chosen woman often discovers new projects, calls, or ways of relating that align more authentically with her now clear preferences. Fifth practice, tend to resilience. Rest, boundaries, and steady rituals of self-care help integrate the sharpened clarity so it doesn't become brittle. These practices are small, practical, and rooted in the principle that the black moon's light is an opportunity for reorientation, not an axe to be wielded. Now consider the people who harmed her. What can they do in the wake of exposure? The path is simple in principle and difficult in ego. Accept responsibility, seek to repair where feasible, and recalibrate behaviors. That may mean stepping back from positions of influence until habits are reformed. It may look like apologizing without expecting absolution, or it might mean choosing to recenter one's life around integrity rather than convenience. Repair is not always possible. Some harms are beyond repair within a certain relationship, but the energetic posture of repair opens real possibilities that denial can never build. There are, of course, common pitfalls to avoid during this transit. One is weaponizing exposure. When someone watches harm-doers stumble, there can be a tempting schadenfreude that sneaks in. The more spiritually mature response is to hold exposure as information, not as an instrument of revenge. Another pitfall is self-sabotage. Some people, newly empowered, burn bridges without discernment, mistaking every obstacle for a necessary purge. The black moon favors measured assertiveness over explosive catharsis. Honor your clarity, but temper it with discretion. Let's address one more tension: the mingling of spiritual language and practical consequence. Many people who speak of Lilith or the black moon use words like divine favor or cosmic justice. Here, if the term divine favor appears in a conversation, understand it as a metaphor for alignment, an energetic flow that supports certain choices. The black moon's effect is experienced as a kind of favor for truth. When you step into clarity, opportunities that fit may begin to align more readily. That's not a prophetic guarantee. It is an energetic correlation. Alignment attracts congruent circumstances. Frame it as the universe rearranging possibilities around honesty rather than as a theological decree. There is also a social ripple that deserves attention. As more people refuse to shrink, communities are forced to define what they tolerate. That redefinition can be messy. Some groups will purge, others will heal, and some will simply fracture. This fracturing is not inherently bad. It's the ecosystem adjusting to new inputs. Where compromise once meant smoothing over genuine concerns, new boundaries will demand structural change. Institutions that once relied on quiet compliance may become untenable until they reform. Again, this is exposure as opportunity. I want to return now to a few stories, simple, composite, and illustrative, not to exoticize pain, but to give you palpable scenarios where these dynamics play out. Imagine a woman named Mara, a project lead who had been compensating for a team's lack of direction. She often took the blame when deliverables missed, smoothed relationship conflicts, and worked late to fix what others could not. During the black moon, she felt the pattern in high relief and spoke up. She refused to take responsibility for another's negligence without mutual accountability. Her refusal did not produce instant drama. Instead, it made visible the team's dependency on her smoothing. Managers who had ignored systemic issues suddenly had to name them. The colleague who had relied on Mara's obliging presence felt the strain. No more free pass. Over months, the team either built structures that distributed responsibility, or those who preferred shortcutting found other teams to join. Mara herself moved into a role that demanded her leadership without absorbing the immorality of quiet toleration. Her wound led to alignment. Consider an intimate example. Lina was in a relationship with someone who dismissed her needs, expecting her to be both quiet and endlessly available. When she refused to shrink, when she made clear what she needed, her partner's ability to gaslight her diminished. He found fewer allies in their social circle who would validate his spin because Lina's clarity made the truth plain. He either adjusted, learned healthier relating, and re-entered the partnership differently, or he withdrew, leaving Lina free to pursue connections that allowed her honesty. Either outcome is better aligned to both parties' truth. Both stories speak to the same choreography. The black moon brings a brighter light to the place of injury, and that light creates conditions that favor truth, alignment, and eventual recalibration. Let me be candid about a harder edge. This transit does not promise comfort. Clarity can be lonely at first. Saying no can feel like exile, especially when your environment has depended on your previous accommodations. That initial isolation is part of the initiation. But the loneliness is not aimless. It is a thinning process, like pruning a tree so it can bear healthier fruit. In time, new connections that are mutually nourishing will appear. The woman's recalibrated presence will attract people and opportunities who can hold her now clear boundaries. A final note on how to witness these dynamics if you are outside the immediate equation. If you see someone who is breaking free of patterns that once required their self-erasure, hold space rather than rushing to validate old power. Do not congratulate the exposure of another's failure with glee. Instead, observe the evidence of recalibration. Are restorative conversations happening? Is there accountability? Is integrity being rebuilt? If the answer is yes, offer support. If the answer is no, encourage repair, not spectacle. Now return to the acoustic of the title. What happens when they hurt the chosen woman during the black moon? In summary, the light shifts. Her wound becomes a map. Her presence sharpens. The person who harmed her faces exposure, internal disorientation, and practical misalignment. The community is invited to choose clarity over comfort. The result is not guaranteed retribution, it is insistence. Insistence that truth be visible and that systems adapt or reveal their inconsistencies. If you feel this word landing on you, if you sense the black moon tuning your field, or if you recognize that you are the chosen woman in your own circle, lean into discernment. Take inventory of your boundaries. Speak in clarity, not outrage. Allow pain to point you toward new direction. If you are someone who has harmed, allow the exposure to guide you toward repair rather than denial. There is dignity in stepping back, owning the part you played, and learning a different way of relating. This cycle is an invitation to honest recalibration. The black moon's frequency does not take pleasure in the fall of others. It simply refuses to continue hiding what has been hidden. It calls for accountability, and it rewards alignment with a subtle but real rearranging of possibility. If this resonates with you, or if you've noticed these patterns in your own life under lunar transits, subscribe so you can follow more conversations about how these cycles shape boundaries and presence. I'm here to explore the practical and the poetic with you. Before we close, hold 3 truths from this moment. The black moon magnifies, not invents. Exposure is a mirror more than a mallet, and transformation is the intent more than revenge. Commit to the work of clarity. Protect your energy. Speak honestly. In doing so, you join a wider current where the feminine-coded frequency refuses to shrink, and, in refusing, redefines the terms of presence for everyone around her. Share your experience in the comments. Have you felt your intuition sharpen during a lunar transit? Have you watched someone's influence shift after they refused to stay small? Tell us what you've observed. Subscribe if you want to keep unpacking how these cycles intersect with boundary work, and share this with someone who needs permission to be seen. The black moon is not a threat. It is a clarifying light. When the chosen woman is hurt under that light, the world is asked a simple question. Will we continue to prop up systems that depend on people's silence, or will we recalibrate toward honesty? The answer arrives not with thunder, but with the steady insistence of clearer presence. Choose alignment. Choose repair where you can. Choose truth.